On against the stream, it don't matter what race or creed or color. You love this land and you're my brother. That anyway, just know your stand. If you say you can't breathe, I'll show you we can. Ain't never gonna stop believing. We were born for freedom. We were born for freedom.
Yes, we were born for freedom. We were absolutely born for freedom. But as y'all know, our freedoms are being taken away almost by the day, feels like it's by the week. I mean, I'm trying very hard not to go full black pill on everybody. We are red pill rage for a reason. We're red pill rage because we want to keep fighting, because we know we're on the right side of history, and because we see the demise of America coming down the pike. Now, some people like to call it the New World Order. Some people like to call it Agenda 21 or Agenda 30 or 31. I don't know how many there are. Some people like to call it the cabal. I like to call it Armageddon. That's what I call it. And as part of our Armageddon series, we've already talked about survivalism, survival and prepping. We are going to be talking about the psychology of a survivalist. We're going to be talking about food and seeds. I've got a really good episode coming up about that with some very, very painful news that we need to be aware of about how the lack of oil and gas is causing a major setbacks for the agricultural industry and in terms of getting the food to the stores, getting the food to the people. I don't want to scare you guys completely. That's why I have to break this up into little chunks. I can't give it to you all at once. Otherwise, we're going to have a 20-part documentary. There's so much to think about. And one of the things that a lot of preppers and survivalists think about last is energy, electricity, communications. These are essential parts of our everyday life. These are going to be essential parts of survival and staying connected and being able to create and maintain a safe community no matter what happens. But we don't think about it. So I have two people on the show. One of them's from TikTok. The other one is her husband. So I guess you could say they're both from TikTok. You guys are going to love her. Her name is Danielle. She is not, I believe not Dan. She can correct me later. Not Danielle on TikTok. Gorgeous. So her husband's a very, very lucky man. And she's very lucky to have him as well. She works in the medical industry, so she is going to come on and talk for, maybe 10, 15 minutes about some things that she's seeing going on in the medical industry right now in terms of supply chain and things that we need to be worried about down the line. But before we get to her, like I said, electricity, energy, communications, these are very serious issues that we need to be thinking about. So before we bring her on, her husband, Justin, who works in the business, has some things that he wanted to share. Now, before we bring them both on, I wanted to play a video for you that Danielle has submitted that she would like us all to watch together. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Listen up closely.
History has never recorded the fall of a state or a city in the way described by the prophets. What weapon could silence an entire continent in 1 hour? The world has never seen one until a few years ago, with the creation of the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. Over and over, think tanks like the EMP Commission, working for the Senate, have warned how this is the greatest and perhaps only real vulnerability of the United States. Yet no administration has done anything about it. We are completely unprepared for what's coming. Every report says the same thing. This event can wipe out 90% of Americans, and all it takes is just one warhead to be detonated above the United States to take us back to medieval times. The lasting effects will destroy society as we know it, exactly as the scriptures predicted. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine. Without hospitals or pharmacies being able to function, people won't be able to take their necessary medication. Without running water, heat, and garbage disposal, diseases will break out. As cars and trucks stop running, market shelves will become empty. Desperate people will become looters, and there will be food riots. There will be no police, no law, no health care, no help. It will all descend into chaos and confusion, a complete collapse of everything we take for granted today. As the prophet Jeremiah says, "And it shall be, when thou hast made an end of reading this book, that thou shalt bind it to a stone, and cast it into the midst of Euphrates. And thou shalt say, Thus shall Babylon sink, and shall not rise from the evil that it will bring upon her. And this is the start of the time of tribulation and sorrows. For then shall be a great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." And yet, the prophet shows that there is still hope. But the ones who endures to the end will be saved. The message couldn't be any clearer. The warnings are there so that only the ones who believe the words and warnings of our Lord and prepare will be saved.
At the Croc, Vanessa's kids play basketball while she unwinds in yoga. And on the way home, they always share tips.
Hi. So, oh, okay. Are you there? Oh, can we hear her? Oh, are we froze? Oh no. Or she said 1 second. Okay. She might have to edit that last part on. Wasn't the greatest when it came to editing that last one. But it explains what an EMP is. No, we froze too. Oh, well, we're there. I'm not sure where she went. Hi. I'm not sure where Jen went. Are we supposed to start? Don't know. Jen. Okay. Yeah, I think she might have froze. She didn't. Are we supposed to start?
Okay, we're both okay. This is I'm editing this. This is my fault. I've been having internet issues for about 3 weeks now, so it's me. It's
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just really worried. I was like, do we talk now or?
all right.
I do want to clarify.
In 3, 2, 1, sound speed, action. Welcome to the show, Danny and Justin.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having us. I do want to clarify a few things before we get started tonight. Number one, nothing that we talk about is meant to be used as, you know, like a fear porn type thing. You know, too many people nowadays, I feel like, try to push things in a fearful way, but I think that it's pretty naive for us not to be informed as well. Also, I just wanted to go ahead and take a second and clarify beauty side of medical, you know, like, you know, waxing, all that. Like, that's what I do. But other than that, I'm a stay-at-home mom of two, and I'm just really concerned for our kids and our future with them. Like the video you just saw, I just feel like a lot of people nowadays, they're not really informed on what an EMP is and the way that it relates to biblical prophecy. The stage is 100% being set. The video you saw was like one of the last in a series that I did about World War III and America's place in the Bible, and how it talks about America being more referred to as Mystery Babylon. A lot of people believe that we're not, but I think that when you look at a lot of the signs and you do your homework, you'll start to understand that, like, the Statue of Liberty is closer to Ishtar, which is considered the whore of Babylon. And that happens to be, you know, our Statue of Liberty is, you know, a pretty big deal when it comes to symbolism in America. So personally, like I said, to make sure everyone knows, I'm not trying to push the fear porn thing. You know, I personally believe in biblical reference, like it speaks of in Revelation, that we don't really have to get concerned until things start happening with Iran and Israel. Once that happens, that kind of tends to start like a prophetic 7-year clock. When that happens, the weapon that they describe in Revelations, which is the video you just saw the clip of, the way it describes is that it wipes out everything, the finance, the commerce, like everything completely, the medical industry, it's all going to be wiped. Your cars are going to stop running. Anything that's connected to a battery, anything that's not shielded in some way, shape, or form, and we'll let Justin get more into that in a few. You know, you got to remember, the only thing that's going to pretty much be left with any kind of power, my understanding from what I've read anyway, is going to be like the semi-truck style gas stations. And the only reason for that is because their generator systems are shielded underground so deep. So the first thing to know, if that happens, if you need immediate supplies and they're available somewhere like that, that's going to be the only place you're going to be able to get gas. That's going to be the only place you're going to be able to get any supplies you might need at the time, or if something, you know, needs to be cold, refrigerated, things like that. But I would say, to be honest, with that information, my understanding is the protocol is, if that happens, the state police tend to take over those stations right away. So just understand that they're going to be crazy. When you get into the EMP stuff, you know, once that happens, everybody needs to remember that we are going to have 3 days, they say, on average. That's what most people are trained for. 3 days before society will completely and utterly collapse. Like you saw in the video, they talk a little bit about people aren't going to have access to pharmacies. A lot of antibiotics and different types of medication are not going to be available. Life-saving technology, forget it. Like, even hospital generators are going to be wiped out. From what I have read, it's going to take a minimum of about 10 years for us to get back to having any type of electricity at all if this happens. And the scary part about it is a country like North Korea would have the capability to, let's say, load some type of a nuke or a missile into a satellite. And if their satellite is orbiting the Earth at the perfect or precise moment above centralized America, like you saw in the video, and it detonates, it's got to be at the right level in the atmosphere. When that happens, everything's gone. And the best advice I can give to everybody is just to make sure you need to have a plan. And 98% of the time, I think most people's plan or bug out plans, you know, like you touched a little bit on survivalists and things like that, and bug out bags are a huge part of that, is just getting to your family, your loved ones, immediate, that is, as far as like husband, wives, kids. You're not going to have time. The freeways are going to be jammed with anything left in them. So always have alternative routes in place. And most of the cars and the vehicles, they're not going to start. And I'm going to leave that to Justin in a second here. He's going to explain If you're in that situation, what kind of vehicles will start, what to be looking for to get them started, and if you have the means or the assets to actually go out and build something, what you will need to build or have on the back burner somewhere just in case, because anything else, like your new stuff today, it's gone. Forget it. It's not starting. And he's going to touch a little bit about the big three and what they're trying to do right now as well. So I'm going to give that to Justin a second so you guys can get some information as far as it goes with the automotive side of things.
So they always have had some type of idea that once they went to electronic fuel injection and carburetors were gone and they were relying more on like microchips and computers to run your car, that there was, you know, lightning in the atmosphere and all that stuff, which had effects on the initial designs of these things. So they had, what they had were shielded wires, and they put the computers in boxes and all that stuff, but nobody's ever really had a real test of like an EMP situation. There is some videos on YouTube and stuff like that where they say that they have tested them and all that, and that like a handful of weird systems like wipers, turn signals, maybe your headlights, sometimes not, especially the like the high intensity LED headlights and all that stuff that run on a whole nother computer per headlight and stuff like that may have issues. Some they're trying to tell everybody that like the main thing is that you could shut your car off, restart your car. Well, when it was just a handful of years ago, there was a handful of other people on YouTube talking that were saying that they didn't believe it either, that was going to work and all that. And most of them were auto mechanics and tinkerers and drag racers and all that stuff. And we all knew that as being auto mechanics and tinkerers and drag racers and all that, there's a handful of systems that would be very hard to fail. Like, I'm not saying that your car wouldn't ever run again or anything like that if an EMP hit, because they're trying really hard with shielded wires, the way that they're grounding their computer systems and all that stuff right now. The older vehicles that ran off of points ignition inside your distributor, it's physically just like a light switch to fire off the engine. Like, it's closed, it's ground. When the distributor rotates, it opens, makes the coil fire down through the distributor cap and through the spark plugs. So most automotive industry got rid of them because they do wear out. They wear out fairly fast for a compared to an electronic ignition system, and a lot faster than what you see today. But they would work because it's just moving parts. There's no electricity there. The electricity is supplied by the battery. A lot of people think that the batteries in the cars, if you had a batteries and computers sitting on shelves, they will work if you plug them into the car. The only problem is that if you just, if you have a car that let's say the fuel pump driver control module in the rear of our F-150 was to go out and during an EMP, I could put another one in, but I'd have to program it. And how am I going to program it if the computers fail and all that stuff? I'm not saying that they don't have fail safes for it and all that stuff, but I'm saying it'd be a heck of a lot easier to just go get a battery and then have an older vehicle that had points ignition system, and even the generators that were before the alternators and all that stuff. Even the generators used a contact set of points like this that just open and close, and that's how they ran their voltage regulators in those, and that's all mechanical stuff that does not get affected by anything. I mean, except for rust and overtime wear, but that would be a good place to start. And then you wouldn't have fuel injection. You would have to have a carburetor and all that stuff. And then you would be guaranteed, if you could find a good working battery, you'd have a good running vehicle, a vehicle that would be guaranteed to run. A lot of the theory is that your engine control modules, analog brake systems, all that stuff is shielded well enough to work after an EMP strike, but they were only tested in like a simulated situation, and they had some issues. And out of, like, I think they said it was 32 cars that they tested, and it was only, I think 3-4 years ago that they tried a test like that. And they, out of the 32 cars, I think they said it was over half of them started up, but they had a lot of various systems that weren't working right, and the cars were limited to low speeds and not shifting, or then they'd shut them off, restart them, and they could get them to go again. But that was a simulated EMP.
Like a virus for a computer.
Yeah, nobody really knows what would happen with a real one, because nobody knows how powerful like a big one really is, because it's never happened.
So what do you think? What year would people have to find?
I know that in General Motors products, General Motors went to a high energy ignition system in '74. Chrysler and Ford were not far behind on that in around that era, and AMC wasn't far behind. And then there's some of their other ignition systems that were in between when they went full electronic and like a high energy style ignition that used something. And Chrysler had some that for a while before they went to like microchips and stuff like that in their distributors that were more of just like a giant microchip of a box. And those will probably be fine too. My speculation is that, you know, I guess I don't trust everything that everybody tells me, and I would just be more safe with having something that I knew would be mechanically sound, like it didn't have any electronics in it whatsoever. It was all done by mechanical to fire my distributor and to charge my battery. It was, you know, more or less the 60s archaic stuff, 50s, 60s, that kind of stuff.
Pre-computer.
Yeah, anything that, you know, because they still use some electronic stuff on vehicles that had carburetors in the mid 70s, early 80s, but then they just the microchip started taking over, and they were able to get better gas mileage and more performance without using as much gas and all that. It was just, and parts didn't wear out as fast. That's the whole reason why they did it. But I know for sure that a set of points will work if you have a car and a battery in it. It'll start a car as long as they're good and kept in good working order.
Oh, did we miss you?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I'm seeing.
You know,
Dad.
I've been saying this for 2 years, and it's not that I'm just a chef. I'm nothing but a chef who grew up with parents who worked in education. I read a lot of books. I watched a lot of documentaries, and I'm a Virgo, so I'm naturally skeptical, careful, organized, prepared, and
I knew I loved you.
Are you? When's your birthday?
September 14th.
I'm September 4th. Yay!
Yeah, what's up, girl?
Slay!
No! I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Ever
yeah.
since I saw the series Battlestar Galactica years ago, I mean, the series started in 2004. It went through 2009, as you can see on the screen. For anyone who's watched this series, it was a huge wake-up call for a lot of us, because if you haven't seen it, let me just recap. So human beings create basically AI sentient cyborgs. The cyborgs take over the universe, or take over the planet, or they take over the 13 galaxies, okay? Or 13 planets, or whatever it is. And they basically kill everybody, right? And there's only one ship that survives to confront and to battle the cyborgs, okay? So think kind of like Terminator. It's kind of a Terminator storyline. But the most significant thing about Battlestar Galactica, and this is the part that always got me, and I never stopped thinking about it. The way that they survived was because they were the oldest ship in the fleet, and they ran on analog communications. So essentially what Justin is telling us is that as far as energy and transportation goes, we need to start thinking about how can we survive, or how can we build, or how can we maintain or create an analog system of transportation. That's what he's talking about, ladies and gentlemen. I don't understand cars. I'm not a car expert. I took auto shop for 1 semester
Nice.
in high school.
Okay, now you need
What
to hit
was
the
it?
sleigh. Sleigh, girl,
That
that's
was
awesome. Yeah.
Okay. That was
Yeah.
it. So that's how I want you guys to be thinking. If you don't understand what Justin is saying, think about this show, Battlestar Galactica. Think about how the only warrior ship that was unaffected by the mass genocide of the human race was the one ship that did not run on digital communication.
Got it.
And
That's
that
what we're
is
saying here.
perfect, because anything digital that's in your car right now, you don't get a guarantee. You hear what they're telling you, and I don't always believe everything everybody tells me, but I can believe that if my distributor rolls that around and it opens, I'm going to get spark at my spark plugs. It's analog. It's completely analog system, and that's the way that the alternators work too. There's voltage regulators with numerous sets of these in the alternator, and it makes the alternator charge. And it's, without going into a long, boring story about how it really works.
What would you tell your mom to do to find something that starts?
I mean, if you wanted to be cheap about it, you could go find like an old Ford Pinto or like, Corvairs and stuff like that are just old cars that as long as you put some money into it, it runs and drives. Leave it at that. You don't have to make it fast if you don't want to, because everybody thinks old 60s cars, they want to go fast and all that. No, you can, if you want to drive it, or old trucks, old pre-73 or 74 trucks, and just keep the point system in them and all that. There's so many different things out right now where it's kind of funny, because there's so many different conversion kits for these points distributors to turn them into a digital type ignition system too. And everybody goes the easy way because they don't want to set the dwell, set the gap, and they have to change that every 20,000, 10,000 miles, and sometimes it's even less than that. But as long as you learned how to do it and then got the proper tools, which were analog tools, like if you went and got a dwell meter, you could probably find one on eBay for $5 right now, and then you'd be able to adjust your own distributor when your points started to wear out so that it kept running. And I have one, and I'm not ever getting rid of it, but it's just, and there's a lot of other guys that think like that in the hot rod community, the tinkering with cars and all that stuff. There's a couple of really good web YouTube guys that are out there. Like, I don't know if I can name drop them, but I'm not even affiliated with them, but I watch them all the time. It's Uncle Tony's Garage. He loves everything to do with like the non-digital stuff. He always wants to have, the points distributors, the carburetors. I don't even think he owns a fuel injected vehicle, maybe one.
He's red pilled too, Rich.
Yeah. He's politically correct on his show because it's a car guy show and you don't never know. But like, you could tell with some of the stuff he says that he's very, very, he's awesome. He would be one of the ones that you would want to go watch, and he explains how to set the dwell in a whole 30-minute video, probably better than I could, because he used to write magazine articles for Hot Rod Magazine and Fast Fords and Mustangs and all that stuff. But yeah, he explains it a lot better than what I could. And my personal last car that I had, that besides what I drive every day now, my last Camaro that I had points in and all that stuff, because I didn't want anything digital, because I thought it was really cool to be retro and go fast.
Yeah,
now,
technology free.
Now it was, you looking back on it, it was like, well, I should have, kept that.
But I mean, I feel like that kind of touches base on why they're trying to push that social credit score now, and why they're trying to push everything to be an electric vehicle. Because if an EMP hits or something gets shut down, if all of these 8 cylinders that are getting rarer and rarer, or even 6 cylinders or even 4 cylinders, like Studebakers, all those old ones, cars, yeah. You can't control it. There's no technology to control it. They don't have control over you if you're a bad person, according to them. I can still go out and fire my car up, and there's nothing they can do about it.
They could never put they'd have a really hard time putting like one of those Brad breathalyzers in the old Points car or something like that.
Oh yeah, you couldn't even do the breathalyzers and something like that would be hard.
That'd be hard to do. And I mean, working around the new age stuff every day, like I fix cars every day, and there's constantly, without even an EMP happening, there's constantly electrical issues in these new cars.
Yeah, exactly.
And everybody knows it. And it turned from an industry where you were turning more wrenches to now we're sitting there with digital volt meters and measuring resistance and checking continuity. Do I got the right voltage here? Do I got the right voltage here? Reading wiring schematics. There's a lot less of the turning the wrenches side. It's more, you almost feel like you should have been an electrician.
Exactly, or a computer programmer.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. I dated a mechanic probably about 10 years ago, and he was even alluding to it, going to that. He's like, I'm just an old school. He was older than me at the time. He's like, I'm just an old school mechanic. I'm wrenching nuts and bolts all day. Like all this electronic stuff, like this is all brand new to me. So even that industry. Let me ask you, I know I'm not sure if this is totally what you came on to talk about, but I did want to talk about communication. How much do you know about do you know anything about ham radio? Do you know anything?
No, my father-in-law, not my father-in-law, my stepdad.
I'm glad you asked.
My stepdad has a ham radio. I know that it inside guts of a ham radio are like your old picture tube TVs and stuff like that, as far as what he's told me. And they do use stuff that are like switches, like light switches, like ignition points type switches, on off switches and all that.
They won't work.
And he's very red pilled, and he's like, yeah, I got one. I went and bought an older one so that it didn't have any digital stuff in it and all that. And he was like extremely adamant that it will work.
And what's crazy is like if you take the class now to learn how to operate those, like he's signed up for FEMA now. Like they have to go test the emergency systems in Metro Detroit areas or suburban Detroit areas. I guess we'll just kind of leave it a little blanketed like that. For how like every first of the month they have to test the sirens and all that. They have to go. They have to check the radios. They have to make sure everything's on point and ready to go just in case.
So I would imagine if you had a ham radio in your house,
you'll be okay.
And then you'd have to buy,
or shortwave.
Yeah, something that is more of an analog, not like a digital walkie-talkie type thing. And anything analog is going to be awesome. Our cell phones, I have a feeling, like even though that they have all that in there, trying to stop stuff like that. Yeah, I have a feeling that anything that they say that they're taking care of so that it doesn't happen with all that, I have a feeling that they're just trying. They don't know for sure.
What's interesting though is I did read an article. I think you'll appreciate this, Jen. Believe it or not, those tinfoil hats that we're all supposed to be wearing, guess what? Aluminum foil will help shield. But I mean, what are you gonna do? You can't wrap your phones and everything constantly in tinfoil, but it will help shield things from things that are EMP. And we need to be careful as well, because if that does happen, I don't know if I mentioned earlier about the planes, did I?
I don't think so.
So
No.
A lot of the newer model jets and airplane engines are built with these shields that, like Justin had touched on, that the big three in Detroit are trying to use to help our new vehicles that are coming out to be shielded. Anything that's older technology, it's going to be like a scene out of Left Behind. Like they are going to fall.
It's not like the old airplanes, but like in between the points and condenser generation type stuff, because the early jet age stuff will be fine. And then there was like the 80s, the late 70s, early 80s airplanes and jetliners and all that stuff. They're saying there's no shields. They didn't ever anticipate any of that. Sometimes they even get frequency issues and stuff within their cockpits and all that. But then like the newer airplanes are supposed to be like fully shielded and all that stuff, because they were, it's funny. It's hilarious how much you think about it, because there's so much anticipation of something like that happening. And if you weren't seeing it, like there used to only be a handful of shielded wires in a wire loom, and now so many of them that are just vital to different car functions are shielded. So they're trying, but it's not a guarantee, because we wouldn't know. until it happens.
No, it would be too late. And that's what makes it interesting when you look at the way that they're trying to push the energy things right now, and everything's supposed to be, build back better, climate crisis, go back on this whole Green New Deals, all that crap. It kind of almost makes you wonder, because private companies like these manufacturers, like the big three in Detroit, okay, for automotive, for example, or some of the newer, airplanes and jets, they're all building to protect. And if you look up, we have no protection from this government-wise over the grid. Private companies, private companies are able to take the time to prepare, to have everything shielded, have everything ready to go for when this happens or if it ever happens. Is our government, though? So, what does that say? And then our government's also trying to push everything.
No, sorry to interrupt. No, they're not.
No, you're
because
fine.
our government is full of mismanagers of our public tax dollars. And plus, we're giving all our money to Ukraine right now. No, we don't. The government, oftentimes I hear government agencies are behind the times in security, technology, and every other way. So of course they're not going to be. Of course not.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead and finish your point.
No,
Sorry.
it's really interesting you say that, because like even Israel used to have, or they still have the Iron Dome. You know what I mean? And that technology will still shield them from like a lot of missile and rocket attacks. But what is our government doing to let everyone know, like, we are secure if this happens? Nothing. And in the meanwhile, all the private companies are making the money off of the preparation to be prepared to do things. I think what's most important to understand about that is, if it happens, to just, like I said, have a plan. Like I've already talked to my mom. I'm like, if the TV's gone, the cell phones are gone, electric's gone, all this is gone. I'm like, don't even sit there at your house for an hour to 2 hours and wait for me to call, or try and wait for the power to come back on. By then it's too late. You need to have a plan, and especially if you're in the city, because in city areas, that's where they say within the 3-day time limit, that's when people are going to start going crazy, going door to door. You better darn well hope that you appreciated your Second Amendment rights, because you're going to need them. Always have a plan, get out of the cities. Yeah, no joke. That's my girl. But yeah, and so, when these things happen, like the clip, clearly shows, it's not far off from what you're going to see. The only difference is in the clips, they're showing most of the vehicles still moving. And you have to remember, if you think, oh, my car's going to start, don't go near those big expressways, because everything that was on that expressway is going to be sitting dead. You're going to have a hard time getting around it. You better have alternative routes planned.
I honestly think it's like a 50-50 crapshoot on like the years, make, models on what of the newer fuel injected vehicles will run. I've seen lots of things and of people saying they will, people testing cars, everything like that. But I guarantee a nice fresh battery off of AutoZone shelf, even if, worst came to worst, you had to go get it without the help of AutoZone staff. You could put it in your
without the computer to look it up.
Yeah, you can grab your battery that's on the shelf that hasn't been plugged in, because what I've read and what a lot of people have speculated that is, that the battery is not plugged in, that battery should be fine. Yeah. Or hooked up to something, that battery should be fine. We don't know what's going to happen to all the computers on the cars right now. I know that I was just in a 2018 Escalade, and I had to do an all systems data scan, and I think there was 62 separate microprocessors in that car for different systems. So how many of those are going to go bad? And then what happens when one of those go bad and it triggers something
like your brake system?
Well, if that one goes, you're still got hydraulic. No, you still got hydraulic brakes, but it's just not, if something goes wrong there, it might put the vehicle into limp mode. You shut it off, start it up, you go another 10 miles, and then it goes into limp mode again.
And by then it's too late, because everybody's going to notice that you got a vehicle that's moving anyway.
Yeah. So as far as a fail-safe guarantee, anything like you said, that is analog.
Old.
Yeah.
Go get your old stuff before they're too expensive.
Yeah. They're already there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go vintage. Go vintage. The moral of the story, everyone, go vintage. Danielle, let's throw it back to you. Now, you said you worked do you work for an esthetician?
No, I'm licensed as a cosmetologist and esthetician in the state of Michigan. So that's what I do.
So Okay, you know what? I mean, don't feel reluctant to tell us what's going on in that industry. I know I misspoke, like, Hillary says,
Oh,
I misspoke earlier. But here's the thing.
okay.
If I wanted to say, okay, this is what's going on in culinary, this is what's going on in sanitation, because sanitation and culinary go straight, go hand in hand, as I'm sure medical and sanitation goes hand in hand. I could speak on that. So don't feel reluctant to
Oh,
say,
well, let me
to tell us
okay.
what's
Well,
going
what I
on.
can tell you right now, I know we spoke a little bit about the medical issues and supply chain issues. We were talking a little bit about SADS, that new sudden adult death syndrome. I'm going to just back it up a second, because as a hairdresser and cosmetologist, most of my clients are for hair. However, the reason I pay so much attention to this is because I have a lot of clients who, after they got the shot, they're like, and it's literally because they will tell me, I don't know if I can say that on here. You can just,
No, you say the juice, the juice.
okay, the
The
juice.
juice.
Okay, sorry, I'm not trying to get you in trouble.
Sorry, I gotta move for juice.
Yeah, sorry. Kiddos, sorry guys. You can edit this out later if you want. But so yeah, anywho, a lot of my clients that would come and they would show up like after they would have the juice, okay, their hair is falling out. And I don't know if you remember, a little while ago, they tried to blame it on a couple of different big hair like manufacturers. But no, it's literally all of my clients that I've talked to that have gotten it. That's where we're noticing the hair loss, the fatigue. I've even noticed being non-juiced, like when I'm around them, I have the symptoms. Like I will have such cramping, fatigue, I'll feel sick. And then it's like if I have a couple of days off, I'm good. But it's literally, how they used to talk about being around the people who had it and the different things that when you breathe and when you're close in proximity, I noticed that a lot. That's why I started paying attention to the effects and things that are happening. I don't know how many people really understand, like, to be a hairdresser, we have to learn like anatomy, physiology at a college level. We have to learn chemistry. We have to learn, color theory. I can't even get into like the whole nine. But what's interesting is when you look at, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts the other day, and they had a doctor come on, and he 100% needed to stay anonymous. They blurred his face. They changed his, vocals like old school, like Unsolved Mysteries style. Okay. And what was interesting is he was saying right now that there is a crisis in certain cities for the medical industry, because he 100% believes that SADS and a lot of these new clotting deaths that people are seeing is directly related to that juice. And what's interesting is he said that they're seeing things show up that look like clots. And the reason there's a shortage on that medication is because everybody keeps trying to treat it like it's a clot. But whatever these things are is unresponsive. Well, and Jen, if you feel like it later, or if anyone wants to see, if they find me on my TikTok, I think it's like my second to last video updated. I run the clip because it blew my mind listening to the show. Right after that doctor got off, they had another gentleman come on, and I screen recorded it, and it's on there. I don't know for how long. We'll see. You know how TikTok is. But you can listen to him. And he has worked in a funeral home as a mortician for 25 years. And he said what he's seeing.
Hold on 1 second.
When he's going,
Danielle, hold on 1 second.
Go ahead.
So it's the not Danny Lee 914.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and you said it's your second.
Yep, it should be. I think I have a black shirt on in the beginning. So if you want to play it, I don't know.
Is it the sudden?
It's literally, there's no video attached to it, so that people can hear the audio the same way I do, and that I have it.
What's up, guys?
Is it the sudden adult death syndrome?
Yes, that one.
Okay, go ahead and keep talking. I'm gonna download it and put it up. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Go ahead. Keep
But
talking.
I mean, if you're gonna download it and put it up, that's even better, because you're gonna hear what this esthetician is finding, and what they're finding, and what the main takeaways from that that blew my mind. As he talks about these fibrous clots that as they are putting in the formaldehyde and getting the blood pressed out, these clots are coming out. They're finding them the size of grown men's pinkies. He says that they are fibrous and they react a lot like a rubber band in consistency. They're not sure what it is. All they can tell is it has its own cellular and its own genetic structure. So they're self-sustaining. And the big thing is, like the host that was hosting during the show asks and mentions to him, is because a lot of people had concerns with the juice having different genetic coding in it. A lot of people also remember when Dr. Fauci was talking about things, and he kind of was one of those things when he was talking about it that he kind of blew past, like he didn't say it. When he was like, it's going to be, nanotechnology that's going to just, be, self-building or whatever. So what's interesting is a lot of people did that research, and then you saw, I'm sure, a lot of the people that talked about the aborted fetus cells being in the mRNA technology. So when people are seeing these clots having their own cellular system, now people are having to ask themselves, first of all, what is the cellular structure on this? If it's growing inside of a person, is it their genetic code in these cells? Like, what is self-sustaining and building these genetic modifications that are happening in these clots? The other big thing is a lot of people, they think, look, as alluding to what the first doctor in the show said, you're walking around and you're not sure why, but your body is given direction to start growing these things. I really hope that you can play the clip before we're done. I want you to hear how the guy came to the conclusion that it was linked to the juice, because what had happened was every time he started seeing it as he was injecting the formaldehyde, oh, what a beautiful shot. Now I need to play. Anyhow, I'll let you guys listen. It's
Sorry.
a long one. So, I mean, if you just cut it when you need to, but the information's there, and you just got to remember, all you're going to see is a screen recording, but you'll hear the audio from the show.
Let's listen to it now. Let's listen to it now.
All right, let's go for it.
Start a little mini series, part 1 and part 2. I was listening to one of my favorite shows today, and they had a really interesting guest, and it's talking about what funeral home directors are finding regarding SADs, and I think we probably all, have the same idea about that whole deal. Anywho, listen, let me know what you guys are thinking. An interesting one. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Okay.
Studio. And there's a lot more of that coming, folks. This has really only been kind of a teaser of what you are about to see. We are trying to wake up the world's medical communities to the truth about what's happening after vaccination. Apparently, people's bodies are being programmed to grow, to build, to engineer biostructures inside their arteries and blood vessels. And for a while, as these grow, they begin to take up more and more space inside the arteries, but blood flows around them at first. And so people may not have any symptoms or anything noticeable, but over time they become so large that they can kill people. And that's why these large tissue-like clots that are very fibrous, that are very durable, they are kind of like a rubber band in terms of their properties. That's why these are being found in people's bodies. And again, our embalmer here, Richard Hirschman, is joining us to give us more details about this. We're going to be joined by Dr. Jane Ruby in a beginning of the next hour. She'll be joining us for her thoughts on all this. So Richard Hirschman, back to you. If the trends that you're observing in this right now, are you expecting to see more and more of these clots now in the dead that are presented to you that you're required to work on?
I believe so. Last year in November, people kept asking me, how many of these am I seeing? And I wasn't really keeping track. So I started taking notes on my computer of people with strange clots. And back then it was pretty close to 50%. Probably in February, it was probably around 60-something%. And it seems like right now, I'm pushing 70, maybe even 80% of the bodies that I do. Sometimes the clots aren't always the same. Now, if I see a body that's not clotted at all or doesn't have anything that looks suspicious to me on my computer, I leave it blank. But if it has even small clots that I find to be strange, I highlight that like in yellow. and the clots that are a little bit more fibrous, like the ones that I showed, you know, kind of like this kind of stuff right here, then I'll highlight that in orange. And if I find out they're vaccinated, like this one was, then I'll highlight that in green. So I am trying to keep track, and it seems like the numbers are getting, you know, more and more of the bodies that I have this strange stuff in it. It also seems like some of the age groups are starting to get a little bit on the younger side. Now, most of them that I've had are older people.
Shocking information there. If this is approaching 70 to 80% of the embalming subjects that you work on, that is consistent, I would think, with a lot of the increased death rates that are being observed by insurance companies and also in government statistics around the world. But I want to ask you a very technical question here. First of all, what is the largest diameter clot tissue that you have collected, that you actually have in your possession right now? If you were to estimate, I don't know, in millimeters or something, what's the largest diameter that you have?
You know, I don't really know. The largest one that I collected was that large one that came out of that carotid artery, but it's no longer in my possession. And that would have been probably almost as thick as my pinky finger.
Right. But you have a lot that I've seen.
What you see coming off of that, those branches,
yes,
that's typically what I'm seeing.
All right, so then I'm just going to estimate that what you're showing us in your vials, they look like maybe 5 millimeters up to 5 millimeters in diameter, something, maybe 4 millimeters, something in that range.
Yeah. Let me find an example of something that is smaller that I have here.
The diameter of a pencil eraser, let's say, to use a common object, something like that.
Usually no, not quite that.
Okay.
Like here's a small sample. I don't know if can you see those.
That looks pretty small.
Yeah, those are smaller ones. But again, you know, then they get bigger.
I see.
And then they get to be a whole bunch of them, you know?
Right. Okay, now here's my next question. What we need to do is we need to, you know, see, these tissues are self-sustaining, which means they appear to be composed of living cells. I mean, they're not dead cells floating around the body. It is not what it appears, because they have branches. They are obviously growing or assembling over time. We need to cut into some of these and see if there's anything going on inside these. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it, but we need a large sample that we can kind of dissect.
Yes.
Well, we also need to run genetic tests on these tissues and find out, do they share the same genes as the person, or is there some other kind of genetic code at work here? I mean, that would be a key test. Unfortunately, I can't run that test, but that's what we need done.
That's, you know, there's more questions that come out the longer we do this. Now I had a medical examiner try to tell me these are postmortem clots. But I've dealt with clots for 20 years, and all these clots that I see are different. And of course I had to respectfully disagree, but I mean, I'm not the doctor. I just know what I see and what I'm used to.
Well, I know what blood cells look like under a microscope, and I know what congealed blood cells look like. These are not blood cells. These are fibrous structures. These have repeating segments. I mean, even sort of scale-like or skin-like segments that are repeating on the outside structures of some of these strands. I mean, that's clearly, these are not blood cells. That's immediately obvious to any trained physician or biologist or anybody. So there's something else, then there's something that appears to be living cells, which means, I mean, if that's confirmed, it means that people are walking around with their answer to
veterinary clinic, and she saw some of the samples, the one of the first that I had it was in a cup. And it looked never seen.
Hey, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, sorry. I told you the internet is having problems. There's like 4 people who live in here. There's too many devices. I can't.
No, gorgeous, you're fine. I was worried. I was like, oh no.
No.
I was like, thanks, Joe Biden. I blame him.
No, we're good. We're good. We pretty much got through the majority of that video, and I think as soon as he said heartworms, I was like, but he said it wasn't heartworms. But anyway,
Yeah.
any last words from you or your husband for the Patriots?
He just popped out a second.
That's okay.
He wanted to say something about there's different ways that you can tune carburetors if you make your own corn whiskey now, but I was like, I'm not really quite sure if we can promote that.
Why not?
But okay, well, he's walking the puppy right now, but for me, I would just let everybody know, like, based off of what the doctors are saying, I think that the reason that the uptick that he mentioned in the younger generation, like when you're an older generation, like the baby boomer generation right now, they're looking for symptoms anytime of like blood clot to begin with, right? So I think what's happening is, if what this mortician is telling us and what the doctors are telling us is these fibrous clots are growing in people with the juice in them, and you're young, you're not going to be looking for blood clot issues to begin with. So why would they look for that in like you know what I mean? So basically, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where just kind of keep an eye on the situation. This is all, I mean, because we've only had the vaccine or the juice. Sorry, you can do what you have to do with that. Out for such a short period of time that everything's just now starting to come to light. And I think everybody with common sense, like yourself, like a lot of our Patriot family, you know, we all kind of, yeah, like no joke. Like all of a sudden you just magically have this new, you know, sad thing occur like around the same time that all this is happening. The other thing that the doctor had touched on was medical supplies running low. He said things like saline solution, different clot medications, things like that are happening. I mean, we're already seeing the tampon shortage happen right now. I mean, whoever thought we'd see that? I highly would.
That's because they want to give our tampons to the trans men. That's why. No, it's one reason. Not a big one.
I'm gonna be good. I'm not gonna go there. I'm not trying to get you booted. But yeah, you know, so I wouldn't doubt if we even see things like even the saline plants that make your eye contact solution and things like that. I wouldn't doubt if we start to see them being pressed to up the ante for more like hospital style saline. So I keep my eye on that right now for our next shortage. I think that'll be a telltale sign to what that doctor said. If that's really what's happening, we'll see that probably soon. But as far as our Patriot family go, I just want everyone to just take the information and, you know, literally, if you're not a car person, and Justin got really technical because that's his life. He's a mechanic. He's a hot rod mechanic, and you know he runs the show where he's at right now. So, basically, just do your best to try and find something pre-1973, old school running. And I mean, especially if you're in the South, find yourself an old school car. He actually just came in, so is that okay if I let him have his little last few to talk? Okay. Here it goes. You remember how you were just saying you wanted to touch?
Yeah.
We're just closing out, so something to say to your Patriot family.
Besides the non-digital, all analog, the other thing that you can do with an older car is, after the gas station thing was prolonged and you weren't able to get gas, is you could take and ferment wood, which makes methanol, which is, there's a whole class of drag racing that runs on what they call it the top alcohol dragsters and whatnot. It's ethanol. They use natural gas, but nowadays, they used to make it out of fermenting wood, just like rubbing alcohol basically, and you can actually run your engine on that by changing different various parts of the carburetor or drilling out orifices inside the carburetor, because it requires a lot more than gas to do it, but then you would be even more self-sufficient. So that's just one of the other sides to owning an older carbureted vehicle.
And for the rest of the Patriot family, if it's our last words before we say goodbye, we're gonna say, "Let's go, Brandon." and Toby says, "Let's go, Brandon," too. So I want to take a second, Jen, before we hop off with you, and I want to make sure that I tell you how much I appreciate you having us tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just got one of those the other day. I should have wore it.
I know we should go grab it real quick. But we just want to say thank you. I love your show. I love you. You are always killing it. You own that sleigh.
That is awesome.
And yeah, girl, you own it. Shelby says thanks. So we're just saying thanks.
Bye, Shelby.
My big old love. So
thank y'all so much for your time. This has been incredible information. This is what I try to do on this show, is like, not to be arrogant or anything, but when I first started, and by the way, this is the 2-year anniversary of my show. I started in June of 2020.
Congratulations.
That's
awesome.
I told myself from the very beginning, I didn't want to be a patriot that just did nothing but jokes. I didn't want to do just attacks on the left. I didn't want to do just criticisms of the left. I wanted to provide action items. Like, that is the most important thing, because we're Virgos. I get bored very quickly talking about the same shit over and over and over and over again. Okay, we know what the problem. Okay, like I said in the beginning of the video, whether you want to call it Agenda 21, the cabal, the New World Order, Armageddon, whatever you want to call it, we know what the problem is. We don't need to keep going. My concern is, how do we protect ourselves? How do we prepare ourselves? And how do we survive this? And eventually, how do we take our country back? That's all I'm concerned about. Anything beyond that, yeah, it's funny. Yes, I love Louder with Crowder. I love Tucker. I love Candace. Yep. I love them all. But they're not even saying the things that you just said in the last 45 minutes. No one's saying anything. No one's
to be honest,
solution.
To be honest with you, you're dead nuts on, like, no pun intended, because we're talking cars. But when you talk about, but when we're talking about, you know, how do we fix it? Well, the very first step is at the local level. We need people who are not incumbents. We need people to run, who have a patriotic mindset, and not even just a patriot. I'd vote for a libertarian over a Democrat right now. You know, most of the real libertarians still believe as long as it's constitutional. And I think, honestly, like, I usually try and say, and I talk to a lot of people in my lives, like, one of my favorite quotes that I can ever say is, there's this old one that says, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I would die for your right to say it. So I could say that about leftists. I can walk right past the pro-abortion thing. Do I agree with it? No. Do I like it? No. But if I see, like, some crazy gunman ready to, like, pop off at them all, I'm not letting that happen. Are you out of your mind? But how many of those leftists could say the same thing about a pro-life rally?
Yeah, exactly.
None.
You know,
and that's the problem.
Now that she's on too, I was going to talk to you about this later, but I saw something really interesting today. Maybe you get a chance to, doing what you do with your show, maybe you'll get a chance to look into it. I guess in the 20s, when the oil industry was really starting, or I can't remember, 20s or teens or something like that, when the oil industry was really starting to take off, J.D. Rockefeller owned a whole bunch of oil. I mean, the obvious oil tycoon that he is. I guess he apparently, I don't know how factual this is, but I wanted to try to figure it out. Maybe one of you guys can. He had a meeting where he coined the phrase fossil fuel. And it's technically not a fossil fuel, and we've all been lied to for most of our lives, I guess. And that it was almost as abundant as water on our planet. And it regenerates faster than what everybody thinks it does. But it was because J.D. Rockefeller convinced other people to call it a fossil fuel and make you believe that this is how it was. And that was on a TikTok thing. And then I saw it again later on like a Facebook post, but now I can't find it anymore. So I was like, I wonder how much truth was into that. Because
well, if they took it down, I mean, Jen, you could probably tell them, if they take it down 9 times out of 10, it's probably right.
That would be interesting to know the truth behind that, because if it really isn't a fossil fuel and it really is as abundant as this person said it was, this one scientist, supposedly, I can't even remember his name. I had it for most of the day, but forgot it. And then he said that it was not a fossil fuel. It's almost as abundant as there is water on our planet. I was like, oh wow, that would be interesting. Why would gas prices be so high?
Well, it's funny you should bring that up, because I'm actually editing my. The title of it is Gasoline Armageddon, and it's part of the Armageddon series that you have now been lecturing us on. And I have someone who works in North Texas for a petroleum company. So I had to go full unsolved mysteries, and I had to change his voice, and we're not saying his real name or anything like that. So to protect him, like it takes a long time for me to edit the videos when I have to change the pitch on the voices and do all that other stuff. But he is going to, as soon as I'm finished editing this, which I will finish tonight, that will be up, and he will explain how the gas prices went up. So he does a really deep dive. So that'll be coming. That'll be part of your series. This is a very, I would say that of all the videos that I do and have done, this series is one of my favorites, because this is what I've really always wanted to talk about, more so than just whatever the newest bullshit of the day is that the radical left does. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's entertaining and it's painful and we got to deal with it and we got to look at it. But I always like to look at the bigger picture. We're Virgos. We understand that. Like, we can look at one little component, or we can look at all the moving parts. I prefer to look at all the moving parts.
Yeah.
My spirit animal is an eagle. There's a reason I've always been this way, because I want to see how everything works together and I want to find the best possible solution. And you guys have done like an incredible job. So anytime you want to come back, please let me know.
Anytime you'd like us back. This has been such a riot, and I love to be able to talk with somebody very intelligent that actually has a good conversation on live, other than like going crazy. But to be honest, like you were just touching on that, Jen, like Bible prophecy, these things that we're seeing right now, that's my passion too. So anytime, girl, that's my girl. And anytime you want to go, like, girl, anytime, because I mean, we're talking wars, rumor of wars, family turning against family. My grandfather used to always, and he was a very spiritual man. He passed away in early 80s, but he always used to say to my mom, the one thing that stumped him in the 80s was in Revelation when it talks about you'll starve in a land of plenty. How do you starve in a land of plenty? Well, as of today, it's either number one, there's plenty of food, but most people can't afford it. Or two, if the social credit score takes over, you're not going to have a score high enough to go to the grocery store, but there'll be plenty of food. So, I mean, and we have to take that for a biblical reference. I mean, if we all believe Revelation to be true, which I believe we all do, I don't want to say there's no hope, because there's always hope. But the problem is, we have to expect, if Revelation is going to come true, things are going to get a little bit worse, but we can fight like hell till it does.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So
I love
that's
it.
my girl. I'm with you till the end.
I will let you know. I will let you know after I finish editing this, and I'll make some little promos that you can put on your page.
Awesome.
And
I'd love
we'll try to get the word out about this video. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, John. I love you bunches, girl. Let me know when it's up.
Nice to meet you, Justin.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and stay
Very
in
lucky
contact,
man.
okay?
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Love you, gorgeous. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.